Jonathan and I recorded a little video. I've been watching him. He is a prolific LinkedIn poster and shares openly about the journey of building his company. Plus, my son got one of the Bevanda drink um, containers when he was at the Dirt World conference down in Texas, and is really proud of that thing. And wanted to know what I was getting. Like he was, I think, a little bit upset that I was also getting something from Jonathan's company when my cooler arrived. And so Jonathan shares openly the journey. And when you get a chance, give him a follow on LinkedIn, give him some support. Anybody that uses this product, let's connect him with that. But I loved Jonathan, you recently posted about a craftsman who was proud of the work that he was doing and told his story of going in a hardware store and how that woman at the hardware store said, "Hey, bring me the money you can to pay for your tools," and how he pays it forward. So Jonathan's a great storyteller. In addition, and so he's going to do a little bit of that today. And yeah, just really stoked to have you here, Jonathan. And like share your story, like just like we're sitting around the campfire, and then everybody else will probably ask some questions about the journey. Be very overt about what you sell and what you offer. We want to be supportive and helpful. We love that stuff around here. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Wayne, and it's good to see all you guys. The only guy that I know is Matt Culp, so it's good to virtually meet you guys. My goal for today is to share my story. It's been an 8-year journey of building Bevanda, which what we do is we build gear for the trades, lunch boxes, lunch coolers, drinkware, things like that. We had a painful process to get to this point. Started the business 8 years ago. I was born and raised Amish, and so eighth grade education, good work ethic. But when we started the company, we kind of anticipated, we knew the runway of the business. And so if you know anything about a product-based business, you can sell all over the country. And with the tools and resources that you have at you have access to at any given time. So we knew there's a massive runway for our business. What we didn't realize is how competitive they are. And so my goal is it's actually more of a personal story than a business story because I think that when you're building a business, it's not just the business. There's people on the other side of that business, and everybody has a story. So I'm going to share my story of kind of how we got to where we did today from a probably just a resilience standpoint. And then I'm going to wrap up with 3 questions at the end, just to kind of inspire you and that questions that you might not have the answer for that you can just maybe write down and take with you. But my like I said, I was born and raised Amish, eighth grade education, very entrepreneurial family. Started all kinds of businesses. I remember my mom and dad starting businesses. And in 2015, we kind of came up with the idea of Bevanda, launched with the drinkware. So all the stainless steel drinkware that you see, the Yeti type products. There was probably 8 big players in the field. Yeti was one of them. Hydro Flask was another. Swell was another. Fast forward to 2026, there's probably 100, and they all have money. And so we were going to try to compete with them. Had no idea what was coming, which I think as a entrepreneur, I think being naive is one of your greatest strengths, which was ours. And so we just kind of went in, had no clue, and our first large customer was actually our landlord where we are today. And he said, "Hey man, that's a cool water bottle. I'll order 700 if I can put my logo on," which we quickly found a avenue in the promotional space. So we said, "Hey, why not ride this wave?" I think the market dictates the success of your product. You as an entrepreneur don't. And so obviously there's product market fit, but it was an opportunity for us to capitalize on it. We did. The reason I share that is we today have 3 different product lines. One of them is a beverage dispenser in the hospitality market. The other one is the trades, which we offer coolers, drinkware for the trades. And then we also have drinkware for more of a female audience. The thing that tied the three together was the promotional aspect of it. And just last year, it reared its ugly head on us, and because you're essentially going after three different customer segments, and it was killing us. So we had to say no to current models of our business, two good models of our business. One of them is 50% of our revenue today. And we had to decide what we're going to do with that. And we decided to potentially either kill it or sell off a product line. And it was a very, very painful process. Decided to rebrand and go all in on the trades. And so we're in that about a year. So what we really, really focus on is anybody in the trade. So business owners, especially, 65% of our business is in Q4. And we found a way to leverage business owners that are in the trades that are looking for a client gift or a employee gift. And we can service them pretty well because it's a product that you can use on the job site every day. The cooler that Wayne has, that's one of our best selling products. It's a 20-quart cooler, and we can print logo printing, which we do in house, which has been a promotional aspect of our business, which is huge. But what we're trying to solve now is our Q1, 2, and 3 problems. 65% of our revenue is great, but we import from China. So you have inventory forecasting, you have inventory load in Q1, 2, and 3, and it takes us about 5 months to get a shipment from China. So it would be a little bit different if we could really forecast our inventory and then 2 weeks later we have it. That's not the case for us. So it's a very, very complex business model. And so we're right in the middle of that wrestling. But I want to share more about me and the things that I've learned over the last 8 years. So my wife and I have a 10-year-old daughter. She turns 11 here this summer. After we had her, she had some significant health issues. And so we were struggling. We have 10 years of secondary infertility. Secondary infertility is, you get pregnant once and then you can't again. That was our story. So a lot of pain and trauma around that. Our desire was to have 3 or 4 kids. And when I married my wife, she had told me that she wants to have 3 or 4 biological, and then she wants to adopt a baby in the future. Now, the goal was for 3 or 4 biological. Let's do it our way. And not even really, when you share your plans with the Lord, get ready because He might disrupt them. And that was our case. It was to get the business to a healthy state where we can pull some cash and fund the adoption ourselves. So we did a private adoption, which can range anywhere from 80 grand to 125,000. In our case, it was 123,000. So selfishly, it was like, we're going to get the business healthy and just pull a draw to the business, fund the adoption. And that's not what happened. So going to my wife's health, really wrestling with the growth of the business, dealing with my wife's health. We had this opportunity come up in summer of 2024, playing golf with a good friend of mine, runs a very, very large company. I don't know if any of you guys know the company Brio. It's a stainless steel fire pit company that's actually in our back door here. They went crazy over COVID. Really, really good friends with the CEO and owner there. Played golf together. And after the round, he's like, what would it look like if I would acquire Bevanda and I give you the CEO job offer? We were doing 2.5 million in revenue, and he's asking me to sell my company to him and to go be his CEO. And they're 52 million, 120 staff. And so it's kind of the thing that I love leadership. I love the people side of organization, what makes organizations great, specifically around culture, core values, those types of things. And so that was a piece that he was missing. So he started tapping on my shoulders. And so we, as a family, it's a family-owned business. My mom owns 10% of the company. My sister owns 10%. We said, what do we do? And we felt like it's such a good opportunity. Why would we turn it down? The acquisition price for Bevanda was at a peak. It was incredible, more than we could ever ask for. And then the CEO the job salary and the offer that he was giving me was incredible. So we spent 3 months in the due diligence phase. And keep in mind, 65% of our sales were coming in Q4. And so we were kind of rolling up on Q4 and said, well, what do we do with this portion of our business? So we started liquidating inventory because we had sales calls coming in. If there was a price conflict, we said, no problem. We'll meet you here. We're actually going to liquidate inventory. We're going to merge with another company. Didn't tell them a whole lot of details. Sold most of our inventory. The day before signing, they pulled the plug. And the reason was they had a massive COVID tailwind and just couldn't quite, their sales slowed down. They were projecting, I think it was 2 to 3x growth. They were going after acquisitions, and this thing kind of comes to a halt. Money in the economy dries up and their business just screeches to a halt. They pulled the plug. And so we negotiated for another 3 months after that to try to work a deal out. Long story short, he wanted me more than he wanted the business. He said, I'll take you, but I don't want Bevanda. And so we spent 6 months in an acquisition phase, really mentally preparing to walk into that season to lead a $50 million company, selling the business for this amount of money. And so, man, what do you do when life hits you with something that you've anticipated for 6 months, something that on paper is probably the best offer that you can imagine, and then the rug gets pulled out from underneath you? And so in the meantime, we're struggling with my wife's health, trying to figure out infertility. January 1 of 2025, we decided we don't need Brio. There's if he's pursuing me this hard, there might be something in me that why can't I go do this on my own? Why do I need him? And so when I pulled the plug from him, he was shocked by that, but we said, hey, let's go do it ourselves. What I didn't realize is we lost our chief marketing officer over that period, he's a chief marketing officer today. Insanely talented dude. We lost 2 other of our team members because it was just this acquisition. Your culture, people like to know where they're going. So we're like, this is all over the place. We don't know where we're going to go. So we had to hit the ground in January 1 of 2025, no clue what we're going to do. And keep in mind, we took our inventory down to 0. We didn't make a whole lot of profit on that because we were trying to liquidate at cost just to get rid of it. So we said, okay, Lord, what do you want us to do next? Exactly 2 months later, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And obviously, we're a very, very close family. My parents actually ended up leaving the Amish in 2016. So none of my immediate family's Amish. We're all Christians and love the Lord. Very, very close family. And so it was a huge, huge shock for our family. Had a meeting with the doctor, basically gave my dad the life sentence, said, got 3 to 6 months to live. It's everywhere in your lungs. It's in your lymph nodes. And man, what do you do with news like that? That's really, really tough news. And I can assume everybody on this call has probably have some type of contact with somebody that has cancer. It's a brutal, brutal disease, and it's not fun to experience that. So from a business standpoint, we had to really recalculate, repivot, and just put our nose to the grindstone. We kind of worked our inventory back up. We had an okay year in 2025. But it was, what do we think? What's the future hold? And so that's when we did our rebrand, kind of really honed in on, okay, this acquisition exposed some of our weaknesses. Let's really, really hone in. Sometimes in e-commerce, which I'm sure you probably know this, Brian, but less is more. Like your offer, a simple offer that people can understand, they can pull the trigger right away. We were confused as a brand. We didn't really know ourselves what we believed in. And so 2025 really solidified that because of coming off the acquisition and even just, really working with my dad with his cancer journey. And so at the same time, we decided to pursue adoption. We we had told our daughter what our plans are, but one night our daughter, 10 years old, comes down the stairs. She was 9 at the time. And she was like, I had a dream last night and we adopted a baby boy. 2 days later, my wife's sister calls and said, hey, and she had no clue that we're talking about adoption. We hadn't shared it with family. We've only shared it with our daughter. And she said, I had a dream last night that you guys adopted a baby boy. And so the tensions in my wife and I, we were discussing the adoption. When is the time right? My just coming off a failed acquisition. My dad's diagnosed with cancer. We don't know what that looks like. Why would we pursue adoption? It just doesn't make sense. But we felt this thing in our hearts of, man, this is the time is now. And so when those two dreams were shared with us, we said, okay, let's pull the trigger. We're able to share the story with our family. My dad, in February of 2025, my dad passed of cancer, which was very, very difficult because he was a 10% partner here at Bevanda. And the same day that my dad passed was when we got matched with our son, our adoptive son. And so, as you can tell, there's so many things that we had to wrestle through from a personal standpoint. And how do you lead business? How do you bootstrap a startup when the leader of the company, family dynamics, health, adoption, what do you do in those moments? And so for me personally, I just felt like it's an obedience thing. Lord, I would wake up every day, Lord, what do you want from me today? Like, what about the business? What about the future of the business? What about my dad? What about the adoption? Like all these things. And these are new every morning. So I just would really rely on that and really lean into that. To kind of throw in the year of 2025, my sister, which was my business partner, which we were co-operators, she owned 30% of the company. She was our chief marketing officer. She was diagnosed with endometriosis in 2025, and they told her that she will never be able to get pregnant. And so that was right at the same time my dad had passed, and we're getting ready to adopt a baby. My sister has this news, and a month later, she gets pregnant. Well, what happens a lot of times with women with endometriosis is they have severe complications with pregnancies, and that was the case for my sister. So she spent probably 30% of her time in 2025 in the business, 70% on her couch, just didn't feel well. So just picture this, coming off a failed acquisition, lost one of our best key employees, talent. My dad had just passed of cancer. We got matched with our adoptive son, which we were supposed to travel in July to Salt Lake City to pick him up. We have a business that's not producing insane profits or results. And my sister, which is my co-operator, is laying on the couch sick. And so, as you think, it probably can't get much worse if you pay attention to the news. Trump announced tariffs are going to go into effect, which is the IEEPA tariffs. In July, he announced that. And so we're kind of gearing up for our busy quarter, and the tariffs hit. And so historically, with all of our product, we would pay about 15%. So if you take $100 item, $15 for a tariff, it went to 128% in July, and it stayed there for 3 months. We had 2 containers on the water at that time, with 7 more projected to come, which then they decreased it back to 55%, which was still a substantial amount. So 2025 ended up being a really, really healthy year up until August. We were sitting at about a 42% growth heading into August. The tariff hit. And so naturally, what do you do as business owners when you have a 45% growth increase and you have 15% surplus of inventory? We decided, hey, we're on a 45% growth trajectory. Like we're we're crushing it. Let's order more inventory. But at the same time, the tariffs went effect. And so fast forward to today, we ordered too much inventory, which inventory ties up cash. And so having to navigate that, we pulled our staff meeting aside. And I believe where transparency from an organization culture standpoint is key is throughout all of the things that I've mentioned. And I know I went through my story fairly quickly, but every single season or roadblock that I hit, we would pull our team into the meeting, which there's 10 of us on the team, would pull our team into the meeting, say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what we're facing. Here's the decisions we have to face with. What does anybody have any feedback, any insights, which most of the time they didn't. But I think just creating that transparency has really fostered this culture of stewardship for our team where they just felt like, man, our leader is under fire. We're going to come around him. And in August of 25, when the tariffs went into effect, and when we decided to order more inventory, we just said, hey, our only goal for the year is to survive. We went from a year of really thriving to the tariffs going into effect. We get into November and our sales year over year are a 10% growth. So we went August 42% to November 10%. That's how much our sales dropped off because we had to do a price increase. And we, from a profit margin standpoint, we had to eat the tariffs. There's no way that you can do a 50% cost increase. And the percentages don't math out to the equivalent of a 50% increase, but that was very, very difficult. So in November, we sat our team down and said, guys, we're at a 10% trajectory. We ordered 40% more inventory. We're getting hosed with tariffs. Our only goal is to not be a statistic because when economic situations like this occur, the statistics are extremely high of businesses going out of business. And so we said we refuse to be a statistic. We're gonna button up. We're gonna button down, and our only goal for 2025 is to survive. So, adopted our baby boy, our son, in July of last year. He's been an absolute crazy story, a total miracle for our family. It feels like our family's now complete. And probably the best news to date is if you pay attention to the news, the Supreme Court overruled the IEEPA tariffs, which just found out yesterday that we're eligible for a massive, massive refund. And so we're going into 2026 this year with a high inventory count, which ties up cash. Our growth trajectory right now, as of today, is at 50% over 2025. So really trending strong, but there's a lot of key decisions that we have to make. And how do you steward that growth well, where it's a sustainable growth, it's profitable, while dealing with all the things that you go through personally as a leader. So I know I really went through my story fairly quickly, and I did that by design. So I kind of want to kind of turn this into in the Q&A and even turn it back to you, Wayne. But some of the questions that I have for you guys is the truth question. Where in your business are you settling right now? Where do you know deep down it's not what it could be, but you haven't made the move yet? That was one of the things where I learned of wrestling with all the personal circumstances, my dad's health. How can you be at your best today? Like how can your business be the best? What about your leadership? The way you lead your spouse? Where in your business or your personal life are you selling right now? Where do you know deep down it's not what it could be, but you haven't made the move yet? The second question is the avoidance question. What's a decision you've been avoiding that, if you're honest, you already know the answer to? That was for us the adoption. That was us in critical moves with the business of navigating all the turmoil. And these are really, really difficult questions, especially when you're going through any season, especially, losing your loved one and your business partners at home on the couch. And then the last question is the pressure question. When things get hard, do you find yourself playing to win or playing not to lose? And how does that show up in your decisions? This was the biggest one for me and our team. And we've actually created a core value at Bevanda, and it's play to win. Um, I think that winning in business is you have to win from a number standpoint. And how do you define winning? Everybody's version of winning is different. But at the end of the day, um, I've found myself over the last 2 years a lot of times playing from a defensive mode where what if the Lord has equipped every single one of you guys with gifts, talents, abilities, and the question is, how are you stewarding those? Are you stewarding those to just play a defensive mode, or are you playing to win? And so I made a personal decision after my dad passed that I'm not in business to play defense anymore. I'm in business um, I'm playing to win. And what I mean by that is the decisions that we make, the risks that we take. And I think you guys all know exactly what I'm trying to explain is when you play defensive mode, you miss a lot of opportunities. And so um, I, it's really hard to share your personal story. I think it's easier for me to talk about marketing and tariffs. So when Wayne asked me to share my personal story, so I guess I just want to turn it over back to you, Wayne, and wherever you want to take it from here.
Yeah. Thanks, Jonathan. And thanks for sharing all that. And such a potpourri or such a mix, right, of life. The the things to celebrate and the things that are hard to transition out of. So no, thanks for all that. And I just jotted down your questions uh on my phone to take a look at that. Do any of you guys have, boy, we could go in so many directions here. Anybody, well, I want to ask you something first. And I jotted down these questions. Maybe you guys, as Jonathan said, they're to sit with and maybe answer right now. Or maybe there's something to go journal about or think about this afternoon while you're on a walk. It could be one of those two things. Jonathan, I'm curious about the last question on playing to win, playing not to lose. I gave the story about how Thomas went to Dirt World, which it for all of you, like it's a big conference. Like it's become a big thing. It's Aaron Witt is the founder of this uh, company, and he's pivoted a bunch and done a bunch of different things, and he's pretty open on LinkedIn about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what is going on. Now, of course, I don't know everybody's story and intimately what's going on and what the whole truth is, but I see him saying, "Hey, actually, I've been living in an apartment in Nashville and top of a garage kind of thing." Like he seems pretty open about a lot of that stuff. But he started out doing marketing work for large, heavy civil contractors, in particular mining companies, doing a lot of things to do their websites, do their help them with recruiting and such. And now he had gotten rid of part of the business and is focused on training. He has a training app, and then he also has this conference, this live conference. So those are the things they do that they get paid for. But he's tried to rebrand the heavy civil earthwork world and call it the dirt world. And Jonathan, when you and I talked, and I think you were about to go get your son, and you were also about you were trying to work a deal out with them of some sort. And I know my son came home with drinkware that was yours. Is that part of playing to win? And like how have you been able to now be trending upward in sales? Could you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely play to win. And obviously, I'm on social media, so I see what Aaron's doing at Dirt World, doing some massive, big things. He's an icon in the space, right? And so, what we discovered after we rebranded is everybody that's attending Dirt World is our ideal client. And so they do a trade show there where they do exhibitors. And so we had this idea. We were broke last year from a cash standpoint, and we had this idea for Dirt World of a collaboration. So we said, "Hey, I got a warehouse full of product, but I'm out of cash. Would there be an opportunity where we could exchange product for a platinum sponsorship, and we brand our tumblers with Dirt World, Ariat, some of your key sponsors, and the pool's open. Like we're coming to the state clean. We don't know what we don't know, and I think honesty in this stage of our business, when you're trying to penetrate markets, honesty is key. And so we sat down with Aaron and Jason and Randy and just said, hey, like this is who we are as a company. We'd love to penetrate the industry. This is what we have to offer. What do you guys think? And they came back with a yes. And so I think so many people don't, if you play defensive mode all the time, you don't make moves like that. And so I think honesty of sharing, hey, this is the current stage of our business. This is what we would love to do. What do you guys think? I think most people don't have the courage. They lack the courage to ask those types of questions because they're playing defensive mode and waiting for business to come to them. I mean, the industry that we're in is it's brutal. The market it doesn't care about your family, it doesn't care about anything. It's just ruthless. It's all about profit and growth, skill, M&A, all these things. And so you got to be resilient. You got to get after it. So absolutely play to win.
Did you have a bunch of leads after that show that you've been able to work and drinkware, coolers, and chasing them
So
through?
we've done so in our startup mode back in 2017, 18, 19. That was the name of the game, trade shows. But what we found is we got hosed with trade shows, totally got hosed because there was all these other big players. It's people that have the most money win. And so it was kind of even before the creativity part of it. It was just like trade shows back then were this giant like reunion for buyers. Like everybody has happy hour at 3 o'clock, the biggest, baddest booths. Everybody's flocking to those booths, and the small guys are left hanging. And that's exactly what trade shows were. But by talking to other people and talking about Dirt World, they had said the Dirt World Build With is changing that landscape, and that's even post COVID, where people actually prefer in person events. And so we were very skeptical. We invested some money in a booth, and we said, hey, we want to make a splash. Let's really see what we can do. To date, it's the best trade show we've ever attended. We recouped our cost plus. We are ready to plan to go back this coming year in November, and so an incredible trade show. The cool thing is that has happened with that trade show is Ariat is a title sponsor. So if you know about Ariat, they're north of $1 billion company. They're more in the equestrian, female, boots, that type of thing, but they're really branching out in the Ariat work division. And so they're the title sponsor of that event. This lady walks in our booth, and just by us having a conversation, she introduced herself as the founder and CEO of Ariat. And immediately, what do you do with a high roller that comes into your booth and starts asking about your company, your products? And so I just began to be vulnerable and transparent with her, and she's like, I'm willing to help you out. And she gave me her cell phone number. So we've been in contact. I've been in contact with her for numerous phone calls. Obviously, she just retired as the CEO, but she's grown Ariat from zero to a north of $1 billion company. They just transitioned CEOs, but she's still the chairman of the board, and I have direct contact with her. So a lot of times too, like that's why you got to define what a win is. So
Yeah.
we're actually have a phone call with their VP of sales tomorrow to talk about a deal that they want to roll our product out. And they have 30 Ariat stores, and they are in over 400 boot barns, and they want to talk about potentially what it could look like to launch our lunchbox with the Ariat work collaboration. So it's a very early stages, but so from a success standpoint, highly successful trade show. Yeah, and those guys at Dirt World, they're a really good group of guys.
Really cool. Um, I got one more quick question. Then I know Brian unmuted, and it could be something that landed from Jonathan that you want to kick in, or it could be a question for him that either because you want to know for your own reasons, or it could be helpful for him. When's the last time you rode in a buggy?
Oh man, probably when I was 19 years old, and I'm 36 today, so
A long time.
long time. Don't miss it one bit.
Brian, do you have a question or do you have a comment or anything?
I never actually muted, so I didn't unmute, but I
Oh,
I
okay.
do have my it's interesting that it's happened over and over, but that are you going to crawl up into a ball or are you going to go play to win? When I had previous businesses, my wife would see the pattern and could predict it with no trouble. I never saw the pattern, but it was always if there was something catastrophic or something major that would happen, I would come home in a mood. I would be negative about it. I would sleep terribly, and it was always like all night long. I'd wake up, think about it, fall asleep, wake up, think about it, fall asleep, and then all of a sudden at 4 a.m. it would be like, forget it. Here's the idea. We got it. And I'd wake up invigorated the next morning with some idea, but it was always like three or four was after a whole night of barely sleeping. And then that next day we'd meet as a team and go after it and come up with our plan for the next couple of weeks to recover from that. But it was always an interesting cycle, and she'd always just be very patient. And then the next day she'd ask me, "So do you have your plan?" But it was just a observation on that playing to win mindset.
Mm.
Great. I see Matt Culp has his hand raised. Brian, would you share quickly with Jonathan about the prior company that went, the one superhero that you built? Who knows? Maybe there's something there that's helpful for him down the road or a further conversation after today, even.
Sure, yeah, we sold it in a while back, but it was called Superhero Stuff. It was an e-commerce site. We pretty much sold anything superhero related other than comic books. So lots of apparel, lots of drinkware, hats, bags, all that sort of thing. We bought it from a guy who was running it out of a um, second story retail store in Portland, Oregon. Moved everything to Pennsylvania. Grew it from 100,000 to 10 million in revenue. But it was pretty much the peak of it was right before the Avengers movie came out, and then the Avengers movie came out, made $1 billion, and every year we basically lost 1 million. So once Avengers made $1 billion, suddenly Kohl's and every department store in the world had the same stuff we had, but selling for $7. We were selling it for
Mm-hmm.
23 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So we survived by having a lot of unique items that were exclusive to us. So if you were a real fan, you could still only buy from us, but it just became everywhere. The market was saturated. So we hit 10 million. Next year was 9 million. Next year was 8 million. The company that bought it is not happy that they bought it because they just continued to see the decline. Superheroes are just, that genre is just so saturated that it went down. But the 10 years of building or the growing it from 100 to 10 was a fun journey.
Mm.
And Jonathan, if there's anything that you hear somebody ask or you want to comment on, great. Otherwise, Matt Culp raised his electronic hand. So
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for sharing your personal and business story first. I really appreciate to hear that. So my question for you is, with the mindset of compete to win. So I look at that as one of the things that you came out of, 2025 with, which was a very difficult time, was the change of mindset. So I guess my question or follow-up question to that would be, again, I'm a big believer that the hardest moments are in life are potentially, if we choose, the greatest growth opportunities from a mindset perspective, but then also too from a learning perspective. So from a learning perspective, I'm sure you learned even more about your business. So I'm just curious with what happened in 2025 with tariffs, which is still present here in 2026, and just some, if you want to say maybe unpredictable circumstances, which, you know, we all business owners are exposed to some level of unpredictability, whether we realize it or not. So my question is what have you learned from 2025 regarding tariffs and your contracts on how are you guys going to do anything different to, now this is going against the win and not be defensive, but to be defensive for your business, what are you guys changing in your contracts or how you're engaging potentially Ariat or Dirt World or any of those? I'm just curious on where you guys are changing or based upon what you learned.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, and I think you don't want to be naive, and you still got to play defense, right? Like I think it's critical thinking in that, but um, man, that's I don't know if I have a direct answer to your question. Um, and I can kind of wrap around where you had said that you in your hardest seasons of life, you either develop character or it builds a better mindset. And so, where Bevanda is today, the things that I've mentioned are some of our biggest blessings. And so, I mentioned the tariff refund. It's a gigantic refund for us. It's life changing money for our business. So, we go from a weak cash position, high inventory, to potentially having both. And so I think that the Lord allows things to happen in your life to build that character and to shape that mindset. And it's a choice. It's your choice of how you respond to that. My sister ended up having a healthy baby. So she's at home, wants to be at home with the baby. So that's a huge win from a family standpoint and a business partner standpoint. Still owns 10% of the company. What we didn't see coming is her replacement that we hired. Um, which some of you might know him. It's Carl Edwards. He has a background of nonprofit. He's been in the nonprofit sector all his life. And he's specifically been in business development for 10 years, was managing a 500,000 budget till last year, $1.8 million budget. And he was the sole fundraiser. So we hired him as our VP of sales, and he's absolutely crushing it. The how we even connect, how our paths cross was even a miracle. And so, I think, running the business by myself when my operator's sick, Laney's here, and it feels like, business is a squat rack, right? You're constantly have that barbell up on your shoulders and trying to figure out like, man, how heavy is this thing today? And some days are heavier. But it felt like my sister and I were unequally yoked because she was sick. And so bringing Carl in, he's super mature, has a family, has a mortgage, just a well-developed leader. And it feels like he's come beside me and has lifted that squat rack to where it feels like his end of the squat rack is higher than mine. And it's been so refreshing, and it's perfect timing. I've mentioned our son. He's 8 months old, healthy boy. It's totally changed our family. And through that, I was in the car 2 weeks ago with my wife, and I said, the infertility pain that you've dealt with for 10 years, and you have Bobo, which is our son, how would you play this different? And her response was, I wouldn't change a thing. And so it feels like coming outside of that, Matt, and it's a long-winded question, Matt, because I'm still trying to figure out what that is. I think that you can have as much strategy in business that you want, but I think the 8 years of building this business, eventually, if you are resilient, you build character, and you consistently do the right thing, it builds to a climax. And at some businesses, it happens in 2 years in, some happens 10 years, and you've all heard it. Some businesses just hit that tailwind, they 300x, they 500% growth, and just profit like crazy. We've never experienced that, but it feels like there's a shift because we brought Carl on board. We're getting a massive tariff refund. We have a warehouse full of inventory. We're developing a new product that over the past 8 years, we've learned how to do that fairly well. up until this point, we didn't know how to do it well. We just built the product and here was the price and let's launch it. Now we do strategic market analysis of, okay, what's a product market fit? How well does it fit in the market? Okay, how's it priced in the market? And if we can't build it for this price, we're not even going to launch it. I think that's kind of the defensive strategy. But when you do launch and then you make the decision, then it's that play to win. I don't know if that answers your question, Matt, but it's kind of a long-winded answer.
No, it does. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I got about 8 minutes. Wes.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling your story, Jonathan, on just like the personal side of it and everything. And the last question that you had with like when things get hard, do I play to win or play not to lose? It made me think of like for me, my first year and a half in business, how to describe it? Short story is we had two kids in that first year and a half, and my wife was on bed rest for 2 months of that. My daughter was born, like her water broke at like 16 weeks, and then after the baby was born, she was then life flighted to a hospital further away at the hospital for about 3.5 months then. And in all that summary and all that, and we also like bought a house the day before my wife then found out that her water had broken, all that fun stuff. But what a lot of us talk about at my church on discussing like when you find things the most challenging isn't in those moments where it's like really hard. It's very much like we have to trust God because we don't really have any control over it. It's like, well, this is kind of what you said about like that waking up and be like, all right, what do you want me to do? Because this is everything that's on my plate. But I think the hard part is after it's kind of done, how I feel like that's like the worst moments where it's like, all right, now I deserve a break or now I deserve to like sit back a bit. Do you feel like because you're kind of you're after that time frame? I mean, it's good to take a break, but it's also I feel like for me, that's where I did the worst, I guess you'd say, is that few months like after the baby was back, after all our kids are at home kind of thing. It was like I just want to not do anything because I'm exhausted over the past 2 years.
And I appreciate you sharing your story, Wes. I don't think it's the matter of what you do in those hard seasons. I think it's more of heart posture. And I learned this from my mentor, which Matt, you know Gary Knoll, but Gary, I've been being mentored by Gary for the last 6 years, and Gary has always pointed me back to one thing is heart posture. And heart posture is this is what do you want me to learn in this season? And I think so many people miss that. And it's hard because you're in the thick of it. And I think that if you ask yourself the question, what can I learn in this instead of, oh man, this sucks. They're two separate choices, right? I can, and it's by the grace of God and Gary's mentoring that I've made that choice in every season. Um, there was a lot of opportunity for me to burn a bridge with Brio. But I said from day one, like I refused to do that. And to now, him and I both sit on a board together at a local nonprofit. And so I think I had every right to hang him out to dry. I mean, we basically did a handshake deal. We signed a due diligence. We signed a letter of intent, signed all those things. But I think it's heart posture. And so I don't think anybody faults you for being in those seasons of, man, this is hard. Acknowledging the hard, that's okay. Because
Yeah.
I think David in the Bible did a lot of lamenting, a lot of complaining.
And I would
But
say
I
in the
think,
season we were good. My wife and I, in the season we were very good. But like afterwards, it
oh,
was
this is
bad.
okay. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
misunderstood you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
man.
I'm talking about more afterwards, and that's something that we've talked about at like a lot of our men's Bible study. It's like in the season, it's like, all right, God, I'm on board, I trust you, and have that kind of heart posture. But I would say like that afterwards season where
What?
I would say almost like I would say it's the mindset of like I deserve this break. And then almost a little bit of laziness and getting lazy with anything from devotions to anything to staying close with God in that time frame. That's a lot of what we discussed at men's Bible study.
Hmm.
And we discussed like, so how do you deal with that, and how do you make sure you don't get into that almost lethargic 1 to 3 months that happens after a really hard trial.
Man, I I don't know if I can speak into that because I haven't
Yeah.
experienced that. I guess
hmm
my question for you would be, what have you learned?
hmm
Like, how have you learned to cope with that?
Yeah, I don't know because I feel like I had it right after. I recognized it then after a couple months or two of like, all right, you got to get back to it. Kind of like this isn't ah. And it was just a weird time because I felt like after all of it, even after Laurel, our youngest, got home, it didn't feel like it got easier in that sense of like different things just kept on being difficult, kept on being challenging. But then yeah, I know in that season it was very much learning to trust God in all of it because I had no control. And in that like that playing to win, what's funny is in that time frame I was still playing to win, but I would say with that, I would just tr I normally with things, I try to put my head down and take care of it all myself. And with that, I couldn't take care of it. It was out of my
Mm,
control. And it was really good growing. My wife and I got closer because it was like, this isn't in our control. And that's, I loved when you said about how your wife said I wouldn't change a thing. And
mm,
that's very much how Alex and I feel about it. So, yeah, I don't know. And it's sometimes it's surprising because it's always like, in trials, that's when I feel like we're closer to God because we really are like, oh, I don't know what to do here. But it's afterwards that sometimes like I'm still good with God, but I notice I'm not pursuing him to the level that I was before.
mm. I think, hard seasons can beat you up pretty bad, and then you have that tendency to just to kind of, and I just want to, and I think entrepreneurs all feel that way. We all business owners, we all have those seasons of like, it would be so much easier if I just sell my business, go work for somebody else. I'd have less responsibility. Probably the thing that I would say to you, Wes, is that the Lord has given you specific gifts and talents that the world needs, not just for you or your family. And that, talking about the parable of the talents, I mean, you
hmm
see how that played out. One of them invested 10x
hmm
return, 5x, whatever those numbers are. The other one buried him and said, "Hey, why didn't?" And he's like, "Well, you wicked servant." He calls him a wicked servant.
hmm
I think I love the inspiration part of that piece of the Lord has you here for a purpose. The enemy knows that, so he's going to try to wear you down. So what the enemy means for good, for evil, can be used for good, right? And so I think that um, just I don't know if I have a specific advice for you to get out of it, but I think that maybe
hmm
just rest in that the Lord has blessed you with gifts and talents that nobody else has that He wants to use. And if it's this obedience part of, I think John Bevere says in his book X, which he talks about the parable of talents, and he
hmm
says that God chooses people to be obedient, and if they say no, he just moves on to the next person. And so I would just, my encouragement would be, Ray, man, figure out what your gifts and talents are. You, whether that's running your business, and just
hmm
lean into that. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
So it's 1 o'clock. Thanks for that. My question or thing I was going to ask or say, you, in a sense, answered it, Jonathan, with what you shared about heart posture and hard times. And Wes, I was just thinking that if we don't make the rest period wrong, like sometimes you end up getting, sometimes you need 1 to 3 months of rest of various things are. And you certainly have gotten back on track and back on the horse, so to speak. And if we don't make the rest period wrong, but just see it in the continuity of the whole story, it's different than if we like try to hone in on that little period of time. I was thinking like cows, if young calves, if they go through a period of inadequate food, they have something called compensatory gain where they can go out there and they can hammer it hard and eat a whole lot and they can get back on track from where they were before. and that's sometimes we do that as humans. Anyway, some of these things about the entrepreneurial journey and the struggles, I appreciate that we have a place where we can talk about this openly and then say, yeah, let's all get back on track. Because a lot of times, like, oh my gosh, you're going to get all the tariff money back. Like, who knew? And COVID seemed so awful in the early days, but don't worry, they just gave out a bunch of money later on and called it 3P and forgivable loans and all that. But part of it is the people, businesses had to survive the initial time, and you've done that, Jonathan. I love how you pulled your team together and say, "We're going to survive. We're going to get through this." And look, here you're going to get some cash. I'm happy for that. That's really great. But yeah, thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for hanging out at the campfire. For all of you who showed up, thanks always. You all make this possible. Your questions, your listening, and so I appreciate each and every one of you. Go get them. If we can do anything for you, please let me know.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great to see you.
See you soon.
Thank you.